Thanks for joining us. This is The Economy. I'm your host, Ibrahim Sani. I am currently at the humble abode of my long-time friend, Sharaad Kuttan. How are you, Sharaad?
I'm very good, thank you.
Clearly, you're a very learned person. These books are very nice ornaments to your household. Any other furniture that you want to go through?
No other paintings, but apart from that, I don't think there's anything
All right,
to recommend.
Let's come down to the brass tacks. How real are you in reading these books, or are they just really furniture?
Well, actually, I read, but I do read slowly. It really is a question of...
a page a year?
I've managed a couple of books. We can talk about the books I've read.
In your lifetime, so about 5 of them.
But no, actually, in preparation for the show, actually not. But I have been reading about American politics, so it's something I like.
Okay, fine. So you have prompted me to ask you about Trump inauguration, impact on Malaysia, and other boring stuff that we need to talk about during Christmas period. But generally speaking, 2016, we were together at BFM. We had an office pool where we did the haram thing, which is betting. I don't know whether you remember this. Yeah, of course, you're slightly aged. I'm not too sure if memory serves you well now. But
yeah, with the cobwebs.
Tak apa, kita dah vote dah sekarang, dua-dua.
Okay.
But generally speaking, only you and me voted that Trump would win. The entire office thought at that point in time Hillary Clinton would win and win easy, because nobody would have thought that a clown such as Trump could win. Turned out he won. My question to you now is, did you expect him to win this time round? Because I certainly fully fledged did. And the difference between 2024 election versus 2016 election, a lot more people actually kind of believe that Trump would win. Whether or not they want Trump to win or not is another matter, but the inability to grasp reality of how real politics works today is as such where people actually thought Trump could win. Were you one of those folks?
Well, it's very hard for me to say because I didn't have a sense of the ground, and I think that's very important. I just read, American websites. But I think that one thing I got, and I'm typically quite suspicious of, is this politics of contempt and mockery, right? So one of the things that I think a lot of liberals and people who supported Kamala Harris and such do is to kind of dismiss Trump because, as you say, of his personality, these kind of absurd statements that he makes sometimes. But I was trying to understand where this is coming from, the kind of Trump phenomena for some time now. And I've been reading around the topic. So I wasn't sure because there was also a lot of analysis of how the polls can get it wrong, and they often do get it wrong. And part of it is they don't know how to poll Trump supporters. They don't really understand. And sometimes I think they're blinded by their own prejudices, right? So in refusing whatever they think of him as a fascist or whatever, they blind themselves from seeing what's actually happening on the ground.
And this is, of course, can be extrapolated to all the other markets, countries around the world. We've seen how strong family names can keep being voted back into office in Southeast Asia, for instance. We've seen the Arroyos, the Macapagals. We've seen how the Shinawat is now back in office. We've seen how Jokowi, for instance, is slowly building his dynasty. If I'm not mistaken, last week they were voted out of his own party, but that's, in my opinion, a rather temporary measure, or they can just hop to another party and so on. This whole politics of contempt and politics of disillusionment, is it new? I don't think so, though.
So, I mean, for me, okay, so there's several things I think you kind of point to. One is the politics of mocking your opponent, dismissing your opponent as being something less worthy of, kind of serious consideration. I think that's what was happening from the liberal side, looking at conservatives, looking at Trump and the Trump phenomena. That's one thing. The disillusionment, I think, is something that's very real. That from what I read of American politics, that there is a disillusionment among many supporters, and I think the way in which Biden and Kamala Harris played the Palestine-Gaza issue, I think bred a lot of disappointment and disillusionment among young people in America. But again, I see America from a distance, like you do. I mean, you probably spend more time there. I've visited twice, so I don't know very much. I try to read, and I try to read people whose analysis is quite grounded in what's happening. So I think the best books I've read on the topic is Deer Hunting with Jesus, which is a book that looks at why the working class in America seems to vote for people like Trump. I'm a billionaire who's now putting together a cabinet full of billionaires. Why would the working class do that? And you know, and such. And also, I read a book about Steve Bannon and the linkages between him and other ideologues of his sort, Alexander Dugin in Russia and all that. So speaking about the books, I do read the books I buy. It takes me a bit of time, but I do read the books partly because I want an insider view of what is happening, you know, and something I can't have myself because I'm not there. Yeah. But yeah.
But another element is, of course, reading is one thing. It's the discourse that follows afterwards that is more important. That would perhaps deepen your understanding of the kind of writings that you read. Based on this, and of course, I think you're selling yourself short here. You too have a lot of counterparties, and you do meet a lot more people, perhaps more than I do. The reading then, therefore, on the ground, how do you feel the sentiment is like? Is the disillusionment now crossing over to the blue states? Folks in California and New York, they are two completely different animals compared to the rest of the Midwest America and so on.
I have no idea. I mean, this is really not... So, I mean, you've invited some of the shows completely unqualified to talk about American politics. Yeah, I have no idea what I'm doing here.
Yeah.
Except this is my apartment.
Yeah.
Okay, but,
but I have no idea what I'm doing here.
I have a reason to be in this house.
No, but
I'll point you to a book I started. I wanted to read partly because in anticipation of the inauguration, the second Trump administration, was a book by Michael Lewis called The Fifth Risk. And this is about the transition, right? So he writes about this officer's transition that every presidential candidate of a certain stature has to put in place even before they have gone to the polls. The officers, what they had to do is they had to put a transition team together. They have to meet people in government and understand what is going on so that when they take over, they can manage it better, right? So what Michael Lewis does is very grounded report on this whole process. You know, speaking about the Obama administration, how it came in and also didn't do very well in terms of the transition, but when they left, they put in these amazing processes. The problem was that when Trump came on, he just largely ignored this, and he ignored it for a number of reasons, partly the money, because he had to spend his own money for the transition. And so what Michael Lewis points to is what is now, I think, big in the news and something we all should be watching. If you're interested in American politics and interested in where this is going, is the dismantling of the administrative state. So that's a book I read, you know, in order to understand, I mean, things that most of us find difficult. I think a lot of Malaysians wouldn't know how to describe our government. It's the entire network of agencies and who gets elected and all that. But one of the things that I think Trump does is that he has demonized the administrative state. The question is that just a broad ideological brush, or is he talking about specific, you know, the lack of accountability, one of the criticisms, the cost of the American administrative state, all that is there. And then this book is quite enlightening in the sense of talking about how complex American government is. And so when Trump takes over, and of course, you know, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, is it Ramaswamy, yes. Right? I mean, they are tasked with dismantling the administrative state. So that's a story. When it comes to the second Trump term, I'm very interested in that, because I'm interested to see how and what he does.
Okay, are you also looking at perhaps some of the early appointments made, you know, maybe scrutinizing, other than Vivek and Elon? I think those are the two big headlines. But do you feel that the overtures that is currently being done by Trump prior to his inauguration is piquing your interest a lot more?
Well, only because that's the headline. So there's, you know, if you go to politico.com, they have a kind of, what do they call it, you know, a dashboard for the picks. And I think one of the early ideas, or one of the early stories was Trump was putting these people that weren't necessarily some candidates that the Republicans would approve of, and trying to push them through because he wanted to demonstrate his power against the Republicans. But he's had a lot of pushback. And he's had candidates fall out, right? Because of scandals or inappropriateness, and there are Republicans who are not playing ball with him, at least in Congress. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I don't know, again, I don't know enough about like a Tulsi Gabbard, is it her name is, and all these people.
Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah. So
Former Democrat, by the way.
Yeah, former Democrat, and part Asian, whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, for me, I think it's a story of governance. I think the one thing that we all should put aside when looking at the Trump administration, the coming Trump administration, is not to demonize it, not to come to the story of Trump with fear or loathing. I think that clouds our own judgment. So I mean, to really step back and think of Trump as a phenomena, think of Trump as a symptom of what is changing in America today in terms of its economy, in terms of its politics, and trying to take a measure from there, rather than decide from the get-go that you hate Trump or he's disagreeable, or on the other side you love Trump because he's going to deliver all these wonderful things. And I know a lot of Malaysians are kind of in their hearts Trump supporters.
Yes, I have met a few.
Yeah. There are a lot of Trump supporters in Malaysia, and they dislike the liberal, loathing of Trump. But they themselves are perhaps equally delusional. I mean, I think on all sides.
No, I was about to say that. I mean, on the point of delusional, I think I can argue any side of the political spectrum can be accused of being part of that. In fact, the shared delusion amongst ardent supporters of any political spectrum is going to be evident when you start trying to be a little bit more constructive and a little bit more criticizing of one's political alliance and one's political policy. My issue here is, how does this translate to us here across the world? I mean, 2016 Trump can be argued is going to be a little bit different from 2024 Trump. And from what I read as an outsider as well, this is going to be a slightly different Trump than we knew of from the first time he became.
Better prepared.
Better prepared, better accustomed to the situation. He probably understands the real politics behind it. He probably understands the great machinery that is running the government and the kind of reactions of world leaders. There is this whole idea of Trump not knowing or not aware of his surroundings, but I doubt that that is the true case.
Yeah, so he just had his first press conference at, what is it, Mar-a-Lago,
yes. Florida.
Yeah, that's right. So he's had his first press conference. All things came up. The inauguration came up, and he said about, he's spoken to 100 leaders and 100 world leaders are coming.
Yeah.
But interestingly, he mentioned Xi Jinping, and he said, I hope he comes. We've invited him. He says, Xi Jinping is a great friend. I've talked to him for hours. And so the idea that with Trump, what we'll get is this, that U.S.-China relations are going to sour even more. Might not, I mean, we don't know, right? But this was his initial gambit, is to say that Xi Jinping is a friend. So, I mean, I think for us in this part of the world where superpower rivalries are going to be something to watch, any hot encounters in the South China Sea are going to be problematic. All those kinds of things, right? As these two superpowers kind of jostle for influence, or at least the American, kind of architecture of security architecture that's been built here is now challenged by China. I think we're all concerned about that. We're concerned about a trade war and such. But I mean, his initial gambit, at least in the press conference, seemed a little less of that sort. So I don't know where he's going. We do know that his pick for, I think, I don't know if it's ambassador to China or trade fella, is somebody who's a hawk.
Yeah.
But, the thing is, I think people have to be realistic. All countries try to promote their national interests, and Trump is no different, right? Trump speaks the language of economic nationalism, of protecting American jobs, which is why whatever accusations of racism you might level at him, when you look at the numbers that voted were among black males.
Actually, it cuts across the demography.
Yeah, he does very well.
Completely different from 2016.
Why? Because they see in him a strong leader, somebody who's going to stand up for America. Yeah, you might not like the whole "Make America Great Again" stuff, and you might think, "Oh, this is dangerous for what somebody like Michael Mandelbaum calls, a hyperpower." But I think that's in decline. You see somebody who is, standing up for America. And why not, right? I mean, if you're American, if you're a Malaysian, you want, your prime minister to stand up for you.
Yeah.
If you're American, you want your president to stand up for you,
yeah.
right? And for your country and its interest. So I think there's a lot that's interesting in the way Trump is going to manage international relations. He kind of rather oddly enough, took on the mantle of the peace candidate during the elections, right?
Yeah.
So, but if you compare him to Biden, who declared himself a Zionist and was and has funded the genocide in Gaza, and Kamala's own kind of weird,
positioning.
and then the Democratic Party being completely slavish to the Zionist lobby.
Yeah.
So why not? Why not Trump, right? But I think what you see in Trump is somebody who says things that people think, okay, he's got short sentences. But, he says things like, strength, I mean, you negotiate from a position of power. He just says things that things are huge, things are awesome. They'll get done in a day.
Yeah.
I mean, his messaging is kind of clear, right? And, Americans, maybe they don't like long sentences, too many subclauses, and maybe the kind of what they think is the slipperiness that comes from a liberal establishment. I mean, I am nauseated by American liberals and the liberal establishment across the world myself. I mean, following the genocide, which is to say they're very slippery. They're just people who won't speak straight, right? Who want to. So I mean, whatever it is, I think we kind of look at Trump with much less bigotry, without those blinders, and maybe we'll get a better sense of who he is and what he'll do.
That retreatist element of American globalization, do you feel that is more evident now, or it's just mostly posturing?
Okay, so this is the other book I've been reading, and this is about...
Banyaklah book you read. So
I do, I just trying to prove you see, that you say I don't read the book.
It's not props.
I do read.
Fine.
I do read. So this book is called The Rise and Fall of the Neoliberal Order, and it basically traces different periods of consensus, right? The consensus coming out of America after the stock market crash of 1929, right? And that sort of New Deal thing, the idea that you had to respect labor and you had to have welfare, and capitalism couldn't be unencumbered, right? It had to be regulated and all that. Now that was a consensus that survived until the 70s and started to break down, partly because, as this author argues, what was holding it together was the Cold War and the Soviet Union and communism as an alternative to capitalism. So once that started to fall apart, then you have a kind of rapacious capitalism that we see in neoliberalism, that the Democrats, that Reagan started, and what's his name, Bill Clinton perfected, right? It's one that does not respect organized labor, that has said, well, we don't care if you don't have jobs or your jobs, move to other countries, right? And so labor in America has been under deep pressure. Now we're in that period where that consensus is also kind of faltering and breaking. Yeah. Well, what Trump, and this is where because I haven't finished the book, this is where I'm not so sure what Trump is in terms of that, right? In terms of this transition period, because he's a man, because he wants to dismantle the administrative state, is against regulation. He thinks that American society and economy is overly regulated. He wants to deregulate it. He thinks we'll free things up, create more jobs. That's the ideological position. Whether it does or not, I don't know. So who he is in terms of these broader movements, I think is what we should look at. So instead of getting caught up in the headlines that, pick up on, Trump's kind of nonsensical statements about women or migrants.
Yeah.
Strip
that away.
Yeah, that noise. Just stop listening to the noise. Stop reading headlines. designed to trigger you,
Yeah.
and you maybe start to see what Trump is actually trying to do.
Despite my demeanor, I do take stock every year in terms of how I have carried myself throughout the year, being reflective of what has transpired, how I can make things better, the things that I have missed out on, the things that I have not spotted, for instance. Do you do these kind of reflections?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I did them more systematically. I wish I did them with
But
more
that's who
depth.
you are. You're rather...
Yeah, kind of scattered.
Yeah.
Okay, but I do think that it's important, and I think if we come back to the question of Trump, I think I also want to get away from precisely the things I criticize other people for, to be easily triggered, to read. To mistake the headlines for the reality, to see surface phenomena.
So
rather
you
than
apply
underlying
that level
dynamics.
of skepticism, but in good faith, basically, is what you're trying
Well,
to...
I think we have to keep an open mind, right? So, I mean, I have my position, in the sense that I have my own political values, but I do think that those values need to be challenged, and then we live in a time where it's deeply challenged by global events. I don't know if anybody still believes in God. I don't, and I don't think anything of the last couple of years or the last 15 months suggests that there is a God out there. But anyway, the more important thing is for me, when I think about human politics or the politics of human society, is to think, what is it that is driving people? Right? What are the passions? What are their fears? And I think today there are a lot of fears. I think, we all have fears. I have fears myself. And so I'm trying to kind of manage that. So if you want, on a personal note, that is maybe some of the reflection I'm trying to do, develop new habits, cast off old habits, that kind of thing. But yeah, of course.
But domestically, are you happy? So I'm going to do a pollster here. But are you happy of where the country's headed? Do you feel that, especially because the show is titled The Economy, quite frankly, do you feel that the country is heading in the right direction in terms of the economy? Or do you feel that it is in the wrong direction? If you are given that choice, I know you hate these kind of things, binary, are we heading in the right direction, wrong direction?
Well, I think one thing, before I answer that question,
everything is nuanced with you.
Okay, no, there's stability. So we have a modicum of political stability in the country that we lacked over the last 4 years. We see politicians maybe not as evolved as they should be. The same old scripts trotted out by all and sundry. We know who that rogues gallery is on that score. But I think more importantly is that the government is attempting to chart a plan, though I think we sometimes forget that it's not just government. I mean, Malaysia is too open an economy to be thinking just about national policies, right? It as a way of trying to negotiate, but the sea is not in our control.
Yeah.
And so global events are going to be really important to look out for. And then Trump and potential trade war between China. Though people have been saying that, in fact, some of the paradoxical consequences of the trade war might be of benefit to Malaysia, right? So paradoxically, Malaysia might benefit from a trade war. So okay, so I think there's all that. I think I'm not unhappy. I would like to see a greater commitment to certain of the reform agenda that the government had, at least the Pakatan Harapan component of government had. And I would like to see the older parties like UMNO reconstitute themselves. I mean, we see in the UMNO youth chief a very young man reading a very old script, a bit sad. Maybe, renewal takes longer than we expect. But I do think there are interesting developments in Malaysia. I look at Sarawak. I'm very interested in what Sarawak is doing. I mean, for me, has been the biggest story this year, and I think will be the biggest story next year because of Sarawak's ambition. I don't know how they're going to realize all their plans, but they're ambitious. They have a positive story.
It all boils down to Abang Jo.
Yes, and I think the Sarawak population, I mean, they want something more. The Federation is under pressure, maybe in a good way, if Anwar and his team can reimagine the federation in a way that will make Sabahan Sarawakians happier. I think that would be good. Ignoring their grievances is a bad idea. And I think that we're on our way to maybe a healthier federation if everybody is thoughtful about it. So, yeah, I don't think we're really in a bad place, not at all.
So, where do people find you these days? I mean, of course,
BFM.
Yeah, so let's
I'm
talk
on the
about
evening.
that.
I'm on the evening show,
Which is a different flavor to where you were in the first stint. So you did a Trump as well, I suppose. Yeah, you went in and then you left and then you went in again. But this time around, a different creature.
Yeah. So it's an evening show. It's
hang on, before you go into that, we were working together, Sharaad and I, 2014, 2015. That was in the morning run. That was a lot of fun, if you ask me, along with our good friend Melissa Idris. And it was very business, very with sprinkles of politics.
I used to listen to watch Bloomberg every day.
Oh yeah, there you go. So so you're in the evening edition. People are driving home. Of course, this is of course if you are onto linear these days. I presume everybody's on demand on podcast anyway. So yes, how has the evening edition been treating you?
Well, they treat me very well. I mean, BFM treats me very well, as AWANI did. But I think more importantly is that, because we do these days when we have talkback, meaning and in fact, every day is a kind of talkback day. We invite calls and messages and voice notes. You get a sense of where at least some segment of Malaysian society is going in terms of where their outlook, their philosophical outlook, their political outlook. It's sometimes shocking, sometimes despairing, sometimes heartwarming, and you feel that humanity
basically the tapestry of society.
Yeah, but people can be quite. I've heard the whole range, right? People deeply compassionate to absolutely inhumane in their thinking about groups, others, migrants, marginalized groups.
Yeah.
So so I think what I do appreciate in listening to all these voices is I get a sense of how complex people are out there, that we think it's just the message. It's often more than just the message. It's the reception of it, the frameworks. And this is why, coming back to Trump, people hear Trump might say one thing and two groups will have very different interpretations of what he said. But because in America it's gotten so polarized. The question is whether in Malaysia we have also in a similar situation, that we have our silos, right? And so
do you think that's the case?
Yes, I think so.
I mean, you're suspicious of the case right now, but
I think so. I think that we have fewer people building bridges. Too many of our politicians benefit from divisiveness. I mean, Dr. Mahathir, I think, is quite divisive. Akmal, what's his name? Dr. Akmal.
Dr. Akmal, the pemuda.
Yeah, he's quite divisive. His rhetoric's always that way. The culture wars that we have here. So if we can find, and which is why I must say I appreciate Anwar. I think Anwar's a much less divisive character. His tendency is not to be, I mean, he gets attacked by all sides, but he's much less divisive as a person. I mean, maybe you can argue that he's been going after the super rich, or whatever he calls the ultra rich. But apart from that, Mahakaya and all those kinds of things. But I think generally he's of that disposition, much more, But is enough being done? I don't know. I ask you, I mean, do you think the country is being torn apart in the way that, say for instance, today they talk about the US in terms of kind of gender divide, that young women have moved liberal and young men have moved conservative. And this whole, bro culture.
No, I saw this trend just after COVID in the US, where people are talking about gender and men, and how men are growing more lonely in America. How single women keeps on moving towards the left. And it became such a trend back in 2021, 2022. These days, a lot of content is being created specifically designed to talk about gender roles, gender nuances, and so on, and the attributions of their gender roles to their communities. So much so that it's holding mainstream in terms of some of the, I guess, podcasts and content creators. I am now seeing that trend that I saw in America in 2021. I'm seeing that this year here in this part of the world, where the role of man and the role of women and so on.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be the flavor that needs to be talked about, because I'm single. I am on dating apps, and it's not easy because it's true. The algorithm is as such where it is favoring the small number of men. So there is this thing called hypergamy. So I don't know whether I want to say this, but
Yes.
tens and sevens and sixes and fives and twos and ones are going after the nines and tens of men. And then the ones of men, the fives, the sevens of, I'm not getting the pool at all.
So yeah, so the question is, okay, I mean that's an interesting dynamic. I was referring to it slightly different. The ways in which men are being pulled towards models like Andrew Tate. And so I know there are Andrew Tate like wannabes in Malaysia. Yes.
I can name a few top of my head, but
And then they might mix a bit of religion in that, but the idea is that this masculinistic, is
toxic masculinity. If you ask me.
Yeah. So that's the label that say liberals might give of that.
I am a liberal.
Yes, and so am I. And I think the problem is that the response to it often is again similar to the way in which we respond to Trump, is to mock it, to deride it, to dismiss it.
To affix labels on it, I suppose.
And that isn't helpful, because that's exactly what drives those kind of young men towards Andrew Tate, because they find that nobody wants to listen to them. There's no empathy on this other side. The other side is very dogmatic. It's given to canceling people at the drop of a hat. They're not really interested in engaging. You either sign on or you're outside this club. And so what happens when people are outside the club? They go and form their own club.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think that if we can avoid that, if our politics, if the differences between secularists and liberals in Malaysia versus conservatives, religious conservatives, are bridged, and there's a bit more empathy. We don't demonize the green states, and we as liberals, or the green states don't demonize liberals, which is something they do, of course. Then maybe the country has a better chance of going forward, I think.
As you age, you become more wiser and less critical. I like you better nowadays. Yeah.
Less hypercritical, maybe.
Less hypercritical. And a lot more empathic.
Yeah. I think one, yes, maybe,
It comes with age, what to do.
Yeah, I like the idea that I'm growing, even at my advanced age.
So you're growing laterally, is that what it
that's something I'm trying to fix. I did go for a swim this morning.
That was Sharaad Kuttan. If you want to hear more of him, you can't get enough of him at BFM Radio. But for now, this is me signing off. If you want to learn more about some of our programs, just head on to astroawani.com for more information there. Until then, thanks very much for watching. Goodbye.